In this video, I want to show you all promising underdogs, the best inexpensive favorites, and the best bets to consider for this weekend. I'll also provide my final probability for each fighter's victory along with their stat differentials. If you find this informative, helpful, or entertaining, please like and subscribe. It really helps keep me motivated to create these videos for you all. I've also added my Patreon information in the description if you want to support me there. There's a $10 a month contribution tier and a $20 a month premium tier. The premium tier gives you early access to all of the analysis and results from my videos, along with the additional data analysis and stats. This includes my prediction model results, fighter history, stat overviews, promising underdogs, best inexpensive favorites, prop bets to consider, and deep dives into each fighter's record and historical fights. So you'll get to see their strengths, their weaknesses, their consistency across different stats, and their stat comparisons versus all of their historical opponents' averages. All of this combined will help you with your picks and bets. There's a $20 a month tier, which is around $5 per event, and you can also purchase each of these separately, but the membership is cheaper and easier. Plus, you're directly helping with the improvement and expansion of the content for this channel. Running this data, analysis, and prediction models takes hours every day and week, so I'd greatly appreciate any support that you can show. And thank you to everyone who has shown me support recently. Also, if you like detailed breakdowns and predictions, I do those weekly for full cards as well, including prelim fights, so feel free to check those out on my channel. Let's go ahead and jump right in. First, let's take a look at promising underdogs. The fighters' names are on the leftmost column, followed by their probability of victory that I presented in the prediction video from earlier this week. These probabilities are not only based on several data science prediction models that are trained for accuracy, but also on qualitative information such as the fighter's momentum, their recent performances, their career's trajectory, psychological factors, their training camps, their weight cuts, and any other available information out there. I've also provided the stat advantages for each fighter compared to their opponent, excluding differentials where one of the fighters has a 0 in their stats in order to avoid misleading information. Alright, I've kept you guys waiting long enough, let's go ahead and get started. The first promising underdog that I want to highlight for you all is none other than Cory Sandhagen. Cory Sandhagen has a height advantage of 3 inches in this matchup, he has a reach advantage of 1 inch, and he lands 0.58 more strikes per minute. Cory Sandhagen has won 17 fights, he's finished 59% of them, he's won 10 out of his 13 UFC fights, and I want you to really chew on that stat for a quick second. Not only does the guy have 13 UFC fights, UFC level fights with his experience, that's really good, he's won 10 of those fights. That is definitely an advantage to consider. Recently, of course, he's won 3 out of his last 5 fights, and he is on a crazy 3-fight win streak, which is very tough for this division. In fact, the last time he lost was all the way back, October of 2021. Now, although I don't personally think that Cory Sandhagen will logically win this weekend, and you guys know I have to stick with the logical picks for you guys, but I do want to highlight the value that's here for picking someone like Cory Sandhagen. Here's the thing. The advantage that Cory Sandhagen has against a guy like Umar Nurmagomedov, it really lies in his diverse striking arsenal. If you don't believe me, look at this guy's previous fights. Just look at his highlights. He has superior experience against very tough competition, and he has a great fight IQ when it comes to fights. Not only is he dynamic and a versatile fighter, he has a great jab, and he's able to use his range control to keep the fight at bay, which against an opponent like Umar Nurmagomedov, that's the skill that you want to see in an opponent like that, or in an underdog that's against him. Here's the thing. He's able to frequently flicker that jab and use that jab, which really disrupts his opponent's timings, and it controls that distance. And not only is Cory Sandhagen good when it comes to boxing style striking and jabs and those fundamentals, he's really good in having a diverse kicking game as well. We've seen him land those leg kicks, those body kicks, those crazy spinning techniques, which do land. And that's what makes his attacks very unpredictable. Not only that, but he maintains a very high volume with that. I think he's actually one of the most active strikers when it comes to the bantamweight division in the UFC. He also has a very dangerous left hook, and he's able to not only land that to his opponent's heads, but he's able to use that really well when it comes to body strikes and stuff like that. He's really good when it comes to feints, jabs, even when it comes to scrambles, and just that like disruptive rhythm that ends up breaking out in between fights. He maintains himself very well in those kind of scramble scenarios. I think that overall, with his fight IQ and adaptability, he is a fighter that you might want to consider when it comes to finding a value bet for this card. So I like how he's able to control the distance. I like how he uses his footwork really intelligently, and he's able to adapt his strategy throughout a fight. And all of that does contribute to his overall fight IQ as a fighter. Now here's the thing though, Umar Nurmagomedov is a crazy wrestler, and what have we seen most of the times when you put a striker against a wrestler? Sometimes it doesn't work out that way, but most of the times what we've seen happen is that wrestlers are able to control the majority of the fight. They're able to take the fight to the ground, either utilize their grappling to control their opponents and prevent any kind of striking game plan from really taking place, or they're even able to get that submission because of their technical skills. So it puts Sandhagen at a very tough spot because he's going to have to utilize some of that takedown defense, prevent the fight from getting to the ground, and use that range to pick apart Umar from a distance. Do I think that Cory Sandhagen will get it done? No, I am leaning towards Umar Nurmagomedov. Full disclosure, if you saw my prediction video from earlier this week, you know that logically the way to go is Umar, but do I think that Cory Sandhagen can pull it off based on his fighting style? Absolutely. I think that Cory Sandhagen is a very interesting stylistic matchup when it comes to this fight against Umar. Now, all things considered, I kind of lowballed Sandhagen. I gave him a 35% probability of victory, and that's after doing the statistical analysis. That's after doing all the research, the fight film studying, and I kind of regret it now. I think that I would bump that up to more like 45 or 43. And that's exactly why I ended up including Cory Sandhagen in this video. I think that there's a lot of value, and that's why I'm really advocating to include him as the first promising underdog in this video. I also want to mention, if you've listened to any of his interviews and just his mentality when it comes to fighting, he's a very disciplined guy who loves fighting. He's very passionate about fighting. He's not just doing this for a check. He truly loves the art and the violence of the sport. And when you have someone who's like that in the UFC, you have some of the best talent. So I really like Cory Sandhagen as an underdog in this matchup. I think he has the mentality to get it done. I think he has the physicality to get it done. And I think he has the stylistic advantages to pull off an upset. Logically, I do have to lean towards Umar, but you guys know the whole point of this video, highlight value for you all. Speaking of value, let's talk about the next promising underdog. It's none other than Marlon Cheeto Vera. Marlon Vera has a height advantage of 3 inches in this matchup. He's 5 years younger. He has a reach advantage of 2 inches, and he lands 1.3 more strikes per minute. And he has a 12% higher takedown defense. Now, all things considered, I'm giving Cheeto a 40% probability of victory, and I think he's a great underdog to feature here. I'm surprised he is the underdog, honestly. Here's the thing. Marlon Vera, he's won 23 fights. He's finished 78% of them. You thought Cory Sandhagen had a lot of fights in the UFC? Well, no. Cheeto has had 23 fights in the UFC. How many has he won? He's won 15 of those. Not only is that an impressive percentage, but that's all within the UFC. If you could measure the value that experience has on a fighter, you would see guys like Max Holloway and Cheeto Vera be at the top of the list, or one of the top guys at the list. They've had crazy good experience. They've won a lot of those fights, and not only have they won, but they've learned with each and every single fight. And the fights that they lost, they've learned through those as well. And not only that, but he's also faced a lot of pressure scenarios where, you know, he's the main event of a fight night, or he's the main event of a pay-per-view. So he's faced that level of stress. He's overcame it. He understands the game. He's very calm and collected as a fighter, which I really like when it comes to a fighter. The more calm they are, that means the more they're processing, the more comfortable they are. And I think it builds this sort of resilience in you as a fighter when it comes to, especially when it comes to some of these like higher stakes bouts. So those are the things that I like about Cheeto, but I still haven't even talked about his style yet. He's a very adaptable fighter, and you know what I love about Cheeto? I love his clinch work. I think that makes him an extremely challenging opponent to face, and I think that he can use that to exploit some of Figueiredo's potential vulnerabilities in this new weight class. Now, I do have to admit, Figueiredo is a beast, and he really does help us understand that age is nothing but a number. He brings that power and that championship experience. He's been, just like Cheeto, he's been through it all in the UFC. So I still think that Vera's relentless pressure and his ability to withstand punishment, his durability as a fighter, does give him an interesting strategic up on a guy like Figueiredo, Who do I think will still win? Again, because I'm giving 40% to Cheeto, that means I'm giving 60% to Figueiredo. But can Cheeto pull off an upset? And if you agree, is he a good value bet? Absolutely. So if you were already leaning towards Cheeto a little bit as an underdog, think of this as a little bit of a confirmation that, hey, he does have the ability to get it done. And with a 40% probability of victory, that's a pretty good price tag for the value that you would get if he's able to pull off that upset. Sorry if I'm rambling a little bit or if I'm over justifying why I think these guys are good underdogs. I'm honestly just very excited about this weekend's event. It feels like a little mini pay-per-view. It has some really good fights on this card, and I think that there's value to be made if you're willing to roll the dice a little bit. So based on that, the next promising underdog that I want to express to you guys is none other than Lupi Godinez. Now, this is an interesting one. She is slightly younger. She lands 0.82 more strikes per minute. She has a 8% higher striking accuracy. She absorbs 0.51 less strikes per minute. She has a 12% higher striking defense. She lands 2.25 more takedowns on average. She has a 31% higher takedown accuracy and has a 56% higher takedown defense. I honestly can't tell you guys the last time I've seen an underdog with that many statistical advantages versus their opponent. I think that Lupi Godinez is a great underdog to put on this card. Not only that, after putting both her and Dern through the prediction models and researching everything outside of statistics as well, I gave Lupi Godinez a 50% probability of victory. That I'm 50-50 on both of these fighters. I'm leaning ever so slightly towards Dern, but Lupi Godinez is definitely equipped to be able to pull off this victory here. She's won 12 fights. She's finished a quarter of them. She's won 7 of her 11 UFC fights. That's right, Godinez does have 11 UFC fights recorded in her record, and she's won 7 of those. But let's talk about those reasons aside from stats alone as to why Godinez has an inner to pull off this upset here. She holds a lot of advantages actually over Dern in this fight, and some of those would include her better striking defense. I think that she's more evasive with her strikes. Generally, she has the better striking defense. She absorbs less strikes as well. I think that she also has really good takedown defense as well. And overall, just more consistent cardio as a fighter from what I've noticed through her fights. I think that her well-rounded skill set as a fighter and some of that recent positive momentum that she has really positions her well to control this fight both on the feet, on the ground. And that's the thing, Godinez does have to be very careful of Dern's submission game and her wrestling and grappling game, and that's going to be a threat that kind of looms over Godinez's head throughout this fight. But keep in mind, Godinez does have a very balanced attack, and she has good defensive skills as well, which will make her a challenging opponent for Dern. That's why I'm giving this a 50-50 here. Bottom line, I would not be surprised at all if Godinez gets the victory over Dern. And that brings me to our next fighter. The next promising underdog that I want to highlight for you all is Elvis Brenner. Brenner is 5 years younger than his opponent here. He lands 0.54 more strikes per minute. He has a slightly better striking accuracy. He has a 2% higher striking defense and a 64% higher takedown defense. Brenner's an interesting one because he's actually a pick of mine. I expect him to win this weekend. I ended up giving him a 52% probability of victory after doing all the statistical analysis, using the machine learning models, the data science models, all of that, and also looking at his previous fights, his opponent's previous fights, doing the research outside of stats, combining the qualitative and quantitative together. I ended up giving him the advantage here. He's won 16 fights. He's finished 88% of them. He's had 4 UFC fights and he's won 3 of those. Recently, he's won 4 out of his last 5 fights. And I also want to share some of those reasons that are outside of statistics as to why I'm actually leaning towards Brenner. And part of the reason is Brenner is the more youthful fighter and he has a very aggressive style. Plus, he has that recent momentum. And I think that those are some of the things that will give him an edge in this fight. And also what we've noticed about Joel Alvarez, he has not been the most active fighter. Look at the last time he's fought. And he's also been kind of struggling with some visa issues. It's been a whole deal with him. I think that Brenner's just the better fighter, more well-prepared fighter and psychologically prepared fighter in this fight. He has this sort of versatility when it comes to his striking and grappling game. And I think when you pair that with his strong takedown defense, he will pose a huge threat to a guy like Alvarez. Now, I will acknowledge that Alvarez does have good experience. He does have a very high-level submission skill set, and his past victories against some of those seasoned fighters does make him a challenging opponent in this matchup. But honestly, the outcome will probably hinge on whether Alvarez can overcome some of that ring rust and that inactivity and leverage his experience to outmaneuver someone like Brenner. Brenner has a grappling superiority when it comes to his fight game. He has a proven track record of finishing fights on the ground, and I think that if he takes Alvarez to the ground, with Alvarez being a little bit inactive for a while, he's probably going to have a pretty good advantage there because of those submission skills. He also has really good striking defense. Now, here's the thing. Alvarez does have a longer reach, and he has that height advantage coming into this fight, but Brenner does have the ability to kind of close the distance when it comes to fighters, and he avoids some of those significant strikes when he does that, which is crucial to being more advantageous in this matchup. Now, Alvarez has also shown some weaknesses when it comes to his striking defense, and I think Brenner might have the ability to also exploit that when he's utilizing his striking to set up some of those takedowns. And I know Brenner struggled with his weight before. The boy likes to eat, don't we all? But he has actually, he's done something that not a lot of fighters will do. He takes accountability, and he has committed to being better when it comes to managing his weight. So I do expect him to have managed that a little bit better, and I think that although small, it might trickle down into this fight as well. We might see him just more comfortable in the weight that he's fighting in. Now, it's not like Alvarez doesn't have the ability to get it done here and prove that Brenner is an underdog for a reason. I think that Alvarez has advantages, especially when you consider his height, his reach, his ability to keep a fight in striking range. But I'm expecting and banking on Brenner's ability to kind of cut that range, get into the inside, and then do some damage, look for the takedown, rinse and repeat. Bottom line, although I think that Alvarez is going to be a challenging opponent for Brenner, I think that Brenner's actually coming in here with more advantages overall. I like his striking capabilities. I like his grappling skills, and I think he's actually a superior grappler. I like his recent performance. I like that he's been active. He's also been committed to just being a better fighter and managing his weight better. And I think that all those things combined will point the needle a little bit in Brenner's direction. Again, I'm giving this guy like a 52% probability of victory, so it's not like I think he's going to come in here and dominate, but I think I've made a pretty solid case as to why he's a good underdog to consider for this card. So let's talk about the final promising underdog before I jump into some of the favorites I like, and then just the overall bets that I think are stylistically and statistically intelligent to consider for this card. So the next promising underdog I want to highlight for you guys is none other than Mr. Rolando Bedoya. Rolando is 9 years younger than his opponent here. He lands 6 more strikes per minute. He has a 14% higher striking accuracy, and he has a 7% higher striking defense. That sets him up really well. In fact, all things considered, statistics and outside of statistics, I'm giving Rolando a 46.4% probability of victory, and that's extremely close to being 50-50. That's very good value, and I think that when you consider the fact that he's won 14 fights, he's finished half of those, he's had 2 UFC fights, so he does have some experience under his belt. Now, he didn't win those, but that is still good experience for the guy. He's recently won 3 out of his last 5 fights, and even though he's coming off those back-to-back losses, I think he's going to be able to shake things off in this fight and really just give Herbert a bang for his buck in this fight. I still think that Jay, or Jai, as someone recommended in the comments me call him, Jai Herbert, I think that he's still going to be able to pull this thing off. I'm giving him more of like a 54% probability of victory, so I think he just has enough to get it done. But Rolando does have some advantages here, and I'm going to talk about those right now. I really like Rolando's precise striking that he's able to combine very intelligently with his strong grappling skills. And that's the thing. We see a lot of fighters that are they're precise strikers or they're really good grapplers. But when you're able to combine both of those things together, then you definitely present a threat to your opponent every time you step in the octagon. So I think that regardless of his recent losses, Bedoya has built this sort of resiliency to him. And watching his previous fights, I've noticed that his ability to switch his tactics mid-fight, that I can't speak enough to how valuable that is when it comes to a fighter. Now, Herbert's reach and his striking power, they're going to be huge threats for Bedoya in this fight, but he does have vulnerabilities when it comes to grappling and his submission defense, and that's exactly where Bedoya can shine in this fight. That's why I'm giving Bedoya a pretty decent chance of being able to pull off this upset here. Now, both fighters will face a lot of pressure to perform in this fight, but Bedoya's well-rounded skill set and his adaptability definitely make this fight more 50-50 than it does just giving it to Herbert and putting it in Herbert's favor. So I think that it wouldn't surprise me at all if Bedoya is able to win, probably via decision, or even being able to maybe pull off a submission victory here. Overall, I still think that Herbert's likely going to win, but he is another promising underdog that I really wanted to throw out there and highlight for you guys. All right, now we're going to switch gears, and now I'm going to talk about the promising favorites for this card, which I've chosen through 3 main criteria. First, they have a high statistical weighted confidence either through my prediction models or through fighter stat evaluation, or some combination of both. Second, their opponent does not have a high probability of victory, so you're not going to notice any overlap between the underdogs I just showed you earlier and these fighters. And the third thing is that their odds aren't too expensive. If a fighter has like -600 or -700 odds, they're obviously just too expensive to pick, but you could always parlay them if you want. In this video, I'm going to focus more on finding you guys some value rather than just stating some obvious picks and pointing out those -600 type fighters. So I consider these 3 things for you guys. I do all the work for you guys, and then I show you the valuable picks that fit that criteria. And if you want to know how I predict each fight plays out and the results, please check out my prediction breakdown from earlier this week where I review stats, each fighter's fight history, the results of my 7 data science prediction models, my final picks, and the method of victory. Now for this portion of the video for these favorites, I'm only going to review their stat differentials that they have against their opponent. But again, if you want those in-depth breakdowns, please refer to that video from earlier this week. It will help you out. So the first inexpensive and confident favorite that I want to highlight for you all is none other than Shara the Bullet Magomedov. Shara has a height advantage of 2 inches in this matchup. He lands 2.03 more strikes per minute. He has a 24% higher striking accuracy. He absorbs 1.32 less strikes per minute, and he has a 30% higher takedown defense. All things considered, I'm giving Shara a 68% probability of victory, and I think he's a great favorite on this card. The next inexpensive and confident favorite that I want to highlight for you all is Azamat Murzakanov. Azamat is 1 year younger. He lands 0.65 more strikes per minute. He absorbs 0.45 less strikes per minute. He has an 8% higher striking defense. He lands 0.08 takedowns more on average, and he has an 8% higher takedown defense. All things considered, qualitative and quantitative, I'm giving Azamat a 63% probability of victory to win. The next inexpensive and confident favorite that I want to highlight in this video is Cal Fernandez. Fernandez is 1 year younger than his opponent. He has an 8% higher striking accuracy. He absorbs 3.2 less strikes per minute. He has a 22% higher striking defense and a 20% higher takedown defense. All things considered, I'm giving Fernandez a confident 73% probability of victory this weekend. So the next inexpensive and confident favorite that I want to highlight for you all is Guram Kutateladze. Guram has a height advantage of 2 inches in this matchup. He's a very aggressive fighter. He has a diverse martial arts background. He's really good with his striking and his grappling. He's done a lot of training and preparation. I think that also with his opponent making his debut, I just don't see him getting it done at all. So I really like Guram in that matchup. And all things considered, I'm giving Guram a 69% probability of victory this weekend. The final inexpensive and confident favorite that I want to highlight for you all before going into the bets that I really like for this weekend is none other than Victoria Dudikova. Dudikova is 7 years younger than her opponent here. She has a reach advantage of 3 inches. She has a 7% higher striking accuracy. She absorbs 2.06 less strikes per minute. She lands 1.5 more takedowns on average, and she has an 11% higher takedown accuracy. Those are a lot of statistical advantages. She also has a lot of stylistic advantages, which I reviewed in my prediction video earlier this week. Now, all things considered, I'm giving her a 63.8% probability of victory, and I think she's also a great favorite for this card. Now let's review the bets that I think have value for this card and have a good statistical and stylistic possibility of happening. Please disregard prop bets where you're picking the other fighter to win. I'll start from the top of the card and work my way down. You'll see that I've laid out a few options for you guys depending on how risk averse you are and how much risk you're willing to take. So, for example, for the Cory Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov fight, I would consider taking Nurmagomedov by decision, or if you want to roll the dice a little bit, you could take Sandhagen via KO/TKO. For the co-main event, Shara Magomedov versus Michael Olejniczak, I would consider Magomedov via KO/TKO. Or if you want, you could also take the fight not going the distance. I think either one of these guys should get the finish regardless. So that's a pretty safe neutral bet there. I also really like that co-main event not going the distance. I think that Shara is probably going to get the finish there, but even if Michael gets the finish, I think that sets you up for some success. You could also take the under 2.5 or under 1.5 for that co-main event. Moving on to Marlon Vera versus Davison Figueiredo, I would consider that one an over 1.5, over 2.5, or even taking the fight going the distance for a little bit more value. I don't see them necessarily getting the finish, either one of them. I think that that's going to be more of an interesting technical style fight. We're going to enjoy regardless, but I don't see either of them getting that finish. Moving on, for Tony Ferguson versus Michael Chiesa, I would also consider the over 1.5 or over 2.5 or taking on that fight going the distance. I don't really like any other prop bets for that fight. For Mackenzie Dern versus Lupi Godinez, again, consider the over 1.5, over 2.5, taking on that fight going the distance as well. I think that that's a safe bet when it comes to women's MMA. We've seen that time and time again, and I don't think that there's going to be a finish in that particular fight, especially given both of those fighters' styles. So up next, we have Joel Alvarez versus Elvis Brenner. I would actually consider taking either Brenner via KO/TKO, or if you're leaning on Alvarez, you could take him via decision. Moving on, for Alonzo Menifil versus Azamat Murzakanov, go ahead and consider Azamat via KO/TKO if you're going towards him. And if you're not, then you could also possibly consider taking the fight not going the distance, or the under 2.5 or under 1.5. For Muhammad Yahya versus Fernandez, go ahead and take the over 1.5 or the over 2.5 or the fight going the distance. And that's just depending on how much risk you want to take for these. So I'm just giving you guys some options here. For Shamil Ghazi versus Dontel Mays, I know I have it written that you could take Ghazi via KO/TKO. Honestly, I would kind of steer clear of this fight. Full disclosure, I would steer clear of this fight. I didn't really like how Ghazi performed in his last fight, and so I don't really know what to expect with some of those heavyweights. They're very unpredictable. Sometimes they either finish it early or they just go all the way. I wouldn't really look for any prop bets for that particular fight, so disregard what I have written there. For Guram Kutateladze versus Jordan Vucinic, go ahead and consider Guram via decision if you're going towards him, or you could take Jordan via submission if you're going towards him. I don't really like any of the other prop bets for that fight. For Victoria Dudikova versus Sam Hughes, you could consider the over 1.5, over 2.5, or the fight going the distance. Generally, again, that's a safe bet for women's MMA. And again, given both of their styles, I don't see either of them necessarily getting that finish. So I think that that's rather safe. For Jai Herbert versus Rolando Bedoya, go ahead and consider the over 1.5 or the over 2.5, or taking on that fight going the distance depending on how much risk you want. I don't really like any other specific prop bets for either of those fighters. And then for Cedric Dumas versus Dennis Tululin, I would consider Dumas via decision if you're going towards him. Or if you do want to roll the dice a little bit, you could take Dumas via KO/TKO. I don't really like any of the round betting for that fight. And with that said, that wraps up this video. I really appreciate you all for watching and being so supportive as always. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and check out that Patreon if you want to support me through there as well. There's a $10 a month contribution tier and a $20 a month premium tier, which includes early results, picks, and bets, and also includes premium data, analysis, and stats as well. Your support helps keep me encouraged and motivated to continue running all of this data and analysis for you guys and providing you guys all these insights. So thank you once again, and as always, see you guys in the next one.